grateful that Darren has come up to say hello to us again. He's been like, if you had a recurring belt, he's like, he's a 7-time winner or something. He's been loads of times. He's celebrated and supported Truthjuice for 8 years or more. And some of the things he's talking about 7 and 8 years ago now are becoming, as I said, along with Roger, part of the zeitgeist, part of the debate in a larger manner. So I'm going to ask him to talk for an hour and 10 minutes. We'll have a break. We'll come back after the break. We'll probably ramble on for another hour and a half. Then we'll forget to go. Then we'll be in the car park. And if it's still good, it'll be about 1 AM. We'll all sort of like go, we've really got to go, we've really got to go. So I'd like to say welcome, Darren, and thanks everyone for coming as well.
Come there, isn't he? He gets better. He gets better every time, my friend. Thank you, Andy, for such a great intro. Don't run away in height now, like I did. He's a good man. Yeah, first of all, thank you all very much for having me back here. As he says, I've been coming here since Truthjuice Birmingham started, because I was speaking in Wales before there was ever a Truthjuice Birmingham. And I think I was one of the first speakers here, and the same for Leicester, for almost every Truthjuice actually. Yeah, all of them. So, I've got nothing to do with the brand though.
There is no brand.
There is no brand, that's part of the point.
Chicken and egg. There's no brand.
Let's have some water as well, Andy, is that alright? Can I get a top up?
Yes,
Cheers.
Still looks sparkling.
Still nice, yeah. It's just a bit warm, isn't it? And I love this modified, upgraded whiteboard. Because normally they always fall over, but this is great. And you know what, for the first time ever, I'm probably not going to use it, but there we go. Somebody there asked me if I was going to carry on from the last talk, and then I realised I forgot what I was talking about last time. I don't actually know, so if anybody does want me to continue, you'll have to remind me of what we were on about. So, sorry?
Parasites.
Parasites, yeah. No, we're not going to build up on the parasites tonight, but thank you for reminding me that is what it was. There's still an issue, we're not going away. Now, tonight we're going to talk about more understanding of the masculine and the feminine for men and women, and to deal with the issues of the plight of men really at the minute, and the issue and our connection with the ancestral masculine. Because I'm speaking this weekend at the International Conference on Men's Issues, and it was a great honour to be invited. It's a big deal, delegates from 20 countries. And they have to keep the venue secret. It's in a different country every year, but they have to keep the venue secret until the last minute. Anyone know why?
Feminism.
That's right. Basically, an international campaign gets launched as soon as the venue is disclosed to try to encourage the venue to stop the event from happening. Because men are not allowed to have spaces to talk about their issues. Men aren't allowed to have issues, but if they do have issues, they deserve them, is the general premise. And for me, the toxicity that's in that, when you understand things like 93% of workplace deaths are men, 84 men a week are killing themselves in this country. It's the the leading cause of death of men under the age of 54, I think it is. But the leading cause of death for men is suicide. There's really something wrong there. There's something wrong there. We're not going to be talking about that tonight, but it does highlight the issue that there's something going on with men, and until we start to talk about it, it's not going to get any better. And those that aren't killing themselves are struggling with motivation, struggling with love, and that is to be loving and attentive to their partners who would like to be so. They're depressed, addicted, escapist, and they're not being allowed spaces to do anything about it. It's a pretty big issue. And not only that, the entire history of men and their offerings is being updated and revised to be a story of singularly oppression and bullying, when, as we're going to look at tonight, that's absolutely not the case. So tonight we're going to look at a healing of the ancestral masculine, hopefully of your personal masculine a little bit, and that's for both men and women in here. And then we'll be hopefully be looking at your own lineages as well, because I think maybe a lot of us might have had problems with male figures in our life, and because of that we made the mistake of having issues with all men because of that. I certainly did. I grew up with absent father, alcoholic, gambler, ran off with my little sister, all these sorts of things. It caused me to have a negative judgment of men, and it caused me to struggle to connect with other men. And I realise now, as I've been hearing that for most of my life, I mean, I've been working on the subject of gender. I mean, I know I've been talking at Truthjuice about language and spells and the word and shapes for years, but really, gender's been a hub of my work for 30 years. I mean, I've been musing it for 30 years. Have a seat, don't be afraid of the front. Welcome. But I've been working actively with the Toltec tradition, as some of you know, Toltec gender for 20 years. Here, Truthjuice Birmingham was the first time I did my first Toltec gender talk, maybe, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe 6 years ago, something like that, 7 years ago. That was at the other venue, yeah, I remember that. But the point being is, I'm just painting the story that what I'm sharing tonight, I think it's rhetoric. It's really the story of my own journey and how I realised that I had thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Are you all familiar with that phrase, throwing the baby out with the bathwater? That's exactly what I had done with the subject of masculinity, energy of masculinity, and indeed my judgment of men themselves. And I think this is where I think men are quite behind women in this respect. I see women referring to each other as sister and meaning it, you know, sisterhood. They've had 150 years of sisterhood, of gathering to connect over their issues and to seek to do something about it and to form solutions. Well, those solutions may have now become questionable, the spirit and the theology may have been good. But when I hear men referring to each other as brother, it often doesn't ring in the ear. It's like they're not sure whether they mean it. It's like they're not sure what it means. And what I've discovered in the last 6 years of journeying with men beyond what I call beyond the edge, which we're talking about tonight, but that's traditionally in the Toltec realm anyway, and in our cultural realms where masculinity was truly forged and where boys became men. You mentioned Nick Clements, he's probably the best respected guy in this country on rites of passage. But traditionally, rites of passage were all about going to the edge and what it means to go beyond the edge, which is really what the masculine is for. And I think one of the reasons men are struggling so much in this day and age is that they've forgotten where the edge is. And what ends up happening is they're milling in the safe zones that have already been kind of fostered and created. And they're like, oh, how am I a man around here? How am I a man around here? And it's like, well, you're not, because this isn't where you find it. But we'll see whether we get onto that tonight or not. Yeah, so what I have found in these last 6 years is that men can heal their relationship with the masculine. They can find brotherhood. They can transition from that sense of still being a boy even with greys in their hair and in their beard and start to feel like a man and what it is to be a man, and to go back and meet their women and their children and their community with that sense within them without it needing to be approved of or recognised by others. It's something that grows within them. Just like a mother. So this is the thing, is rites of passage are different for men and women. For a woman, becoming a mother is very fixed. You're either a mother or you're not. And once a woman has become a mother, no matter what happens, she'll always know she's a mother. Nobody can take that away from her. And it's the same for the transition for boys into men. Did you see that Nick is coming in a couple of weeks, is he?
Yeah, it's September.
Really? I might come for that. Yeah. Yeah. Evening. I actually didn't plan on speaking about this. As usual, I had absolutely no notes with me. I was like, what am I going to speak to these guys about tonight? You know, we'll just come in, something about the masculine and ancestral, let's go from there. I'll tell you why. It's because I have a deep affection for this group. There's some of these faces I've been seeing for 6, 7, 8 years, and I always like to just look around the faces and say, oh yeah, what does that face make me want to say? Oh yeah, this. And so I'm just going with that, and I genuinely mean it when I say I have a lot of love and affection for this group. I know there's some new faces here, please don't be put off by that. I can feel it for you too, but certainly there's some trusted old faces here that I've got a lot of respect for and a lot of time for. And one of the things I'm here for to this evening is to Yeah, specifically this evening, I suppose I'm here to try to connect with my sense of homage to your lineage, because that's what's been growing in me in recent years, and I realise it's something that I've never spoken about. So, a few minutes ago I was talking about my own healing journey. So I mentioned my dad. So my dad, yeah, as I said, alcoholic gambler, ran away with my own sister, had children, got married, so I've got cousins that are my half-brother and sister, all sorts of weird stuff that people used to say when I was growing up. It's a bit odd, isn't it? But as you know, when you're a child, it's not odd, it's just what it is. You know, so because I grew up with it, it was completely normal. And while that had problems for me growing up, and I had lots of anger issues with my dad, and had fights and all sorts of stuff, the only reason I mention it is because I have the most spectacular relationship with my father now. I can't even begin to tell you the respect he has for me, the love I have for him, and the ridiculous amounts of effort it took to get to that stage. And there's loads of people in my family and other families who judge my father as a young man for his inability to cope with the transition into fatherhood, for his inability to cope with the responsibilities. But now, here I am, a father myself, 4 children, and he was the first person, before even my mother, that we could leave our kids with, because my mum just couldn't handle them. Couldn't handle them now. She could handle us when we were young. She couldn't handle them now that she's older and struggling a bit. You know? But he could. He has changed, he has grown, he's evolved, you know, he's taken a lifetime's journey. But all this stuff about tarring people with a badge for their whole lives, without giving them the space, the opportunity, the support, and the love to change, you know, everybody suffers. Everybody suffers when it goes down like that. And I know there's loads of people that have had problematic relationships with fathers and with mothers, but tonight we're looking at the masculine. So, loads of issues with fathers. And I suppose one of the things I want to, you know, bring in tonight is about having a bit of empathy for your struggle, how difficult it's been for you to master being a human being, how difficult it's been for you to master your emotions, your sensuality, your sexuality, your anger and frustration at the world, perhaps your own substance abuse, perhaps your avoidance of issues, your own depression. It's not easy, is it? Not easy. And I think we're a bit more evolved than our parents were. And I think we've probably got better support structures than they had. And yeah, just that. So, just a bit of pause for a moment with that, because how many people here have a positive relationship with their father now? Yeah, there's not many hands. How many people had a troublesome relationship with their fathers when they were younger? Yeah. How many absent dads? Yeah, absent fathers, anyone? Yeah, present fathers who weren't really present? Yeah? Yeah, okay. To be honest, what I have now come to do, and I think one of the big turning points of me and my relationship with my dad, was when I thanked him for leaving. And I thanked him for staying away. Because he would have done more damage to me in my journey of the masculine with his old, outdated imprints than leaving me to it. And I think that's one of the things I've been sharing in the mentor I've been doing with people, is that because the masculine is being updated and it's being renewed, there's almost a spiritual imperative and purpose to keeping old models of the masculine away from you, so that you're left in the sea of just a void where it was or should have or could have been, so you can discover it for yourself. And I think it's always been necessary. I have said it to this group before, but I'm just going to say it again. And then, again, those of you who were at that talk all those years ago may remember we talked about the journey of the transition of the genders of the last 150 years, where the masculinity in women was being strengthened for the last 150 years, while the femininity in men has been getting strengthened. And this has been to achieve a greater gender balance within men and women, so that now we all have a measure of the masculine and feminine in us, which I'll talk about in a little bit, whether we're men or women. We're kind of less polarised. We're almost a little bit more androgynous because we've got a bit of masculine and feminine in us, despite the fact we're men or women. But what's happened is that because the masculinization of women started first, what we're dealing with now is hyper-masculine women and hyper-feminine men, which is part of the reasons that relationships are crashing, families are devastated, and there's a real pickle in the communities. But there was an interesting thing that happened with the old male gender model. And that was that, so you'll hear feminists now and in women's gender studies, they'll talk about all this oppression of men all these hundreds of years ago. But to me, the penance for those men, that was kind of paid during the World Wars, okay? It was really paid where in the First World War you had millions of men being mowed down by machine gun fire, dying with the screams and the horror and the terror of the blood and the guts and the feces around them, and the seas of blood that they literally had to swim through, not knowing whether to live or not. This is real men, people really experience this. And it's really not very nice. And the whole classrooms of boys in this country, the classrooms of boys really, were sent off to this war without a choice. And what a lot of people who are whinging about the vote these days didn't realise is that back in the days of the vote originally, the reason men had to vote was because it meant you had to go to war. That was why you had it. And one of the things of the suffrage was women wanted to have the vote, but without the burden of having to go to war. And it was a bit of a pickle. One of the other funny things about, just to correct the revisionism that feminism has brought, is that in this country, in 1814 I think it was, only 4% of men had the vote. 4%. That rose to 56% in 1870-something, when women almost got the vote, but it wasn't all women, and this was Emily Pankhurst who was behind this, it wasn't all women, it was just the landed women. And the reason they didn't get it was because other men didn't have the vote either. And the other 44% of men, which is the working class men, the unlanded men, the unwealthy men, didn't get the vote until the same time as women did. The exact same time. The male suffrage is completely obfuscated from most people's education. And it's ridiculous because it's an absolute fact. 44% of men didn't get the vote until exactly the same time as women. That's just a minor detail really, but it's an important one just to do with how you're only being fed part of the information. Another example is people are getting to celebrate the suffragettes. The suffragettes were a genuine, bona fide terrorist organisation. They actually were. By modern definitions, they were domestic terrorists. And what they used to do was domestic terrorist acts. And, do people know about the White Feather Girls? Yeah? So the White Feather Girls were part of the suffragettes, and what they did was they went to wealthy men who didn't go off to the war, and they would present them with white feathers in public, which was to call them cowards for not going to war. And this was from, they were telling them to go and perform their duty to go and die for the women. When those very women who were asking for the vote would refuse, they refused to go and do the same service. They wanted to vote without responsibility. So there was a real twistedness in that. But the actual genuine equal rights movement were called the suffragists. There were loads of them, and the people that we have to thank for equal rights as we know them today are the suffragists, who were men and women of reasonable, good intention, who wanted equality of access for men and women to workplace, establishment, vote, things like that. They're the real ones we have to thank, not the suffragettes, who were utters, basically. They really were. They just got pressed. They were like a protest group. But they weren't the ones who brought the change. The ones who brought the change were the suffragists.
The suffragists worked themselves into positions of power within government and within the whole structure, ready for the change.
Everyone hear that? Yeah? So the suffragists were the ones who were actually doing the work. They were going in and doing the work. It's a bit like modern day activism. What you'll find is, and I used to be involved in activism, and the reason I got out of it was because these people aren't willing to do the work for the change. They just want to demand others to change for them. That's what the suffragettes were doing. The suffragists were putting their time, their irreplaceable lifetime, on the line by going and doing jobs that people don't want to do. That's the thing that, people ask why aren't good people in Parliament and government, at least the working Parliament. The reason there's not good people there is because good people don't want to go and do the job. They want to go and do something else. They want to go and enjoy the weather. They want to go and live their creative lifestyle. And so who does that leave to go and get the jobs? narcissistic psychopaths. You're the one who take the job. That's what it boils down to. But the suffragists were the example of people who were willing to put aside their personal desires to say, no, I want to change this much, that I'm going to go and take on a job that I don't really want to do. And that's what they did, and we got change, but from them. So there's so much revisionism in what we've been fed on the subject of gender and the story of the history of men and women. It's quite staggering. It really is staggering. And this gets, this is in mainstream academia. People are being fed these quarter truths and complete lies, and it's being passed off as academic credibility. To me, it's staggering when anybody can go out and check the facts of what I'm saying here tonight, and it's factually on the record as being what happened. It's really quite staggering, and I got this information from a woman. I didn't know. It was a woman that told me. I was like, wow, I went and checked it out, and she was absolutely right. I was like, oh, goodness me. So, but yeah, I was talking about the world wars. And what was interesting about the world wars is that they were the beginning of the decimation of the old role model of what it meant to be a man. And that was like the spiritual purpose of the wiping out of millions of men across Europe. Not just a few hundred, not just a few thousand, millions of men. Do you remember what, obviously there's some new people here, so, I've got to do a little segue into mastery for a moment, if that's alright. Loads of you have heard this countless times, I almost have to do it every time I'm here, but I'm not going to lie on the floor this time though. I'm tired of doing it in my clinic. It's just wrong when I'm going to do it. It's just not right. But if you imagine that when you were, so all the subject of gender I'm going to be talking about tonight is about the mastery of gender. And I want to elaborate on what I mean by mastery for a moment. So to me, mastery is having a coherent expression of what you intend. Okay? So if you imagine that when you were a baby, you were lying there on a mat, or just lying there without a mat on the carpet, on the floor, in the store, I don't know what it was in your home conditions, and you were lying there and you were like, ah! Your arms were kicking and lashing, and you were pooing, you were peeing, you didn't have any bladder control, you didn't have any bowel control, you didn't know what to do with your hands or your legs, and that was the state of affairs really. You would be hoping to caress your mum and you'd be clawing her, she'd be getting scratched and stuff like that. And most of the mums probably remember the claw marks, when your baby bit you when you had teeth and stuff. That's pretty memorable. My missus has told me that's quite monumental. When little teeth fight and they're not meant to. But it's not like it's meant, it's because we didn't have any body dexterity. Okay, there was no body dexterity. And everybody here, it took you roughly a year to get your body to walk. Okay, roughly a year, roughly a couple of years to get your body to talk. Okay, that's pretty standard. Just give or take a few months there, but it's pretty standard, and that's how long it takes for consciousness to master, or not to master, but to begin to get a handle on what to do with these bits. And nobody shows you what you do with the muscles in your leg. Nobody shows you what you do with the muscles in your arms. Nobody shows you what you do with your voice box to make sounds come out that are understood. You don't see what's going on inside anybody's throat. You just start making sound, blah, 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 and then suddenly they end up becoming understood. Because of your relentless effort, your relentless application to try to do what you've seen, which is everybody in the family is walking except me. Right, what are they doing? Those legs things are kicking. Right, I'm going to try that. Have you seen a baby? Your parents, when your baby's kicking, they think they're walking, but it's just the action. There's no oomph there. But then when the oomph is there, it's a transformation, isn't it? The power seems to come from somewhere else when we're really applied. But you can almost look at the first 10 years of life as trying to master this form. Everybody you know can do incredibly dexterous feats with your hand. You can go and get a drink without spilling it on you. I can guarantee you for the first couple of years of your life that was not the case. It was ending up on you, at the table, at the floor, and your mum and your dad, everywhere. It really wasn't pretty. And that's what we get to say. We're just trying to spill milk because everybody does it. Everybody spills the milk before they can pick it up. Everybody. Now when your emotional self, your emotional body is birthed forth at puberty, it does the same thing as the physical body did. It spasms and it lashes without any conscious control, without any dexterity, except it manifests as uncontrolled attraction, uncontrolled shame, uncontrolled embarrassment, self-consciousness, all these sorts of things, arousal. And just like the arms and legs, you cannot get it right first time. You cannot. Nobody can. In the same way as with your arms and legs, it has to go wrong a few times first before you're like, oh right, okay, this is what we do. But look at the support you got to get good with your arms and legs. Where was the support when you were expressing your sensuality, your sexuality, or just your feelings? You know, there's a really high demand in our culture that you get it right. First time, or shame, judgment, derision, scorn, public embarrassment, humiliation. Sound familiar to anyone here? Oh yeah, oh yeah, no shame in it now. That was then, this is now.
Every Saturday night.
Only Saturday? And to be honest though, it's exactly the same for the mind. Most people's mind is doing, the mental body is no different. It basically does its own thing, spasms about a bit with thoughts that are about you, about other people, about the world, about politics, about stuff that's nonsense, about stuff you'd rather not say, about random things. You're like, where did that even come from? You know, the mind is exactly the same. And in fact, things like meditation and stuff like learning, and on one hand, some people take on meditation as a coping strategy for a mind they just don't know what to do with. You know? For other people, it's a learning strategy to learn, how do I turn this tool into something I can dexterously wield so that it serves my internal purpose and intention. That's the mastery I'm talking about here, which is when we can weave our body, emotions and mind to express that without hurting us and without hurting other people. That'd be good, wouldn't it? You know, that's what I mean by the journey to mastery. That's a lifelong quest. So don't be hard on yourself if you've not achieved it yet. It's a lifelong quest, and for a few things are needed to pull it off. First of all, you need the space to practice. Second of all, you need a bit of support. And third, some examples would be handy. And for most of us, we've got really good examples of walking and talking because everybody does it. But then when it gets to emotions, oh, where were the good examples? How many people had good examples of emotional expression in the family home? Good expressions of anger, of frustration, of outrage, sadness. You know, how dexterously expressed were these when they moved through the bodies of your mum, your dad, uncles and aunties, grannies and granddads? Really not that skillful in my case, that's for sure. It really wasn't that skillful. But this is the thing, it takes ages to become skillful with it. So I'm going to use the example of anger. I use anger always because it's the best example. So anger is the most bullied emotion of all because the first time it shows up, people get told to put it away. It's not good enough. Usually in a not very nice way. Don't speak to me like that. Go to your room. No, mate, it's not enough for you. It's okay. You know, something like that. Say sorry. And it's like, you speak to me like that. I find that with my kids, it's awful. It's like, I look at this, we'll say to the oldest, don't speak to your sister like that. Why are you speaking to her like that? Can't you say it nicely? And it's like, oh shit, that was me. She's doing that because that's what I did to her. And then that was what was done to me. Oh dear. You know, the speed you've got to be to catch up on yourself and to be compassionate to yourself. You know, you've got to be compassionate to yourself, otherwise you just wither in judgment of yourself. You know, that's it. Don't wither. Don't wither. There's no point. Just say, all right, that was that. Knock it over the cup of milk. Let's do better next time. But for most people, what ends up happening is, especially when we're talking, so let's do anger first. So anger starts to show itself. So what a child learns is, how I express anger isn't good enough. So I'm going to put it away. I mean, don't put it away. So they put it away. And it ends up being that it comes out in all sorts of weird ways. Because energy has to move. It's got to move. And so it's either going to come out positively, which is when you try to take charge of it, you try to have a go with it, or it's going to come out negatively, which is where you try and pretend it's not there, but it oozes out the sides. It kind of oozes out in odd ways. So in anger, what you've got is, you've got some people that go, you know, and they're really obvious with their anger, you know, and it comes out in really obvious ways. Some people are violent, some people aren't, some people shout, some people don't. Some people are verbal, some people aren't, so some people go. And that's how you know they're angry with you. And they may not speak to you for weeks, you know. They might make you a crap cup of tea. They might not invite you out next time. They might give you a smaller portion of food. They might spit in your food, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, everybody expresses anger in different ways. But the energy of anger is the same. The energy of anger is the same. It just moves through the human form in different ways. We express it in a different way. It's like sadness. The energy of sadness is shared. How we express it is different. This is what a shared humanity is. Our shared humanity is the fact that these are shared things. Anger moving through us is a shared thing. How we express it, that's unique and different. You know, there's many ways of expressing anger as there are people. There's many ways of expressing sadness, all that sort of stuff. So when we get onto the subject of sensuality and sexuality and gender, it is no different. And so when I say people have thrown the baby out in the bathwater with masculinity, they have judged the behaviours, the spasms, the rants, the advances of the people that they've encountered. And they've decided that the energy of masculinity itself is flawed and at fault. And the same way as saying, anger is a disease that must be healed. It's like, no, anger is not a disease. It is your fuel for change. It is your fuel for change, and what may need healed and changed and updated is how you let it move through your form. That's the only problem with it. Every single one of our feelings, other than happiness and joy, are the desire for the world to be different. The desire for it to be different. My frustration. I wish it was different. My anger. I wish people weren't fucking kids. My sadness, same subject. Sadness, I wish people weren't dropping bombs. The desire for it to be different. So all of our feelings like that aren't a celebration of what is, are the energy of, I wish it could be different. And when we demonize any of them, when we make them out to be wrong, then we put them in a black bin, what I call the black bin bag, which is, we pretend we don't have it. Imagine it's a limb, like anger's a limb, like this, woo, you have anger, yay. I've been told it's bad, I'm like, oh, this is bad. Hey, I don't have anger anymore, that's great. I'm a New Age man, I've dealt with my anger, I meditate, yes, I've been to yoga class, I drink smoothies, I don't have anger anymore, that's fine. Until you get prodded in the right place by the right situation, and then you find out where you're really at with your anger. You find the truth of your masquerade. You find the truth of it. And that's only anger we're talking about. It applies to all of our feelings, whether we're men or women. And it's the same thing, which is, you find out where you're really at. Now, for a lot of people, depression is the opposite of expression. And depression is the result of thousands of instances of unexpressed wishes for it to be different. If not millions. Millions of times something bubbled up in you that you stifled and bit back for one reason or 20 until they compound, because you don't give them any space. And when you don't give space to your feeling, first of all, you let others' feelings take the space up. But when you give no space to it, it starts to compound within you. Until, when somebody starts to ask you, how do you feel? The answer is, I don't even know anymore. Do you feel great? Top mammal on the planet. Do you feel great? No. Okay, so if it's not great, what is it? Angry, sad, don't know. And this happens a lot in when I'm doing like retreat work with people. Because you kind of got to take people out of their normal context to dig into this stuff. Because when you ask people to dig into it, they'll look and they'll be like, I can't even see what it is. And this is why I call it the black bin bag. Because the black bin bag is an amazing thing. Because our consciousness and our mind, it symbolises the void. So the void is obviously black nothingness, isn't it? So what happens when you stick something in the bin? Throw something in the bin. Woohoo, it's gone! Yay! All that packaging, way, it's gone! Not anymore. That can juice just had, way, the can's gone, brilliant! stick it in the black bin bag, and it's literally gone from existence. And this is what happens with people's feelings, and with their unexpressed desires for it to be different. We stick it in this bag, pretend it's not there, until it's full, and when we look for it, it's just blackness, black nothingness. But you imagine you had your black bin bag with all your rubbish for the last 15 years in your garden. And it's closed, so you can't see what's in it, you can't smell it yet. And then you open it up. What does it smell like in there? Oh, it doesn't smell very good. But what's good is, what you don't know is, people think it doesn't smell very good, but actually, after this length of time, it's compost. Hey! It's not as bad as you think. This is why in Chinese mythology and stuff like this, what do they have at the door of the temple? What's at the door of the temple in like Chinese temples and Japanese temples and stuff? Dragons. Dragons and lions and things like that. Big scary creatures. Big scary creatures. But what's in the temple? Great things. People think, oh, the dragon's guarding the temple. It's like, no, it's not really. It's actually about what we think we're going to be facing when we delve into the black bin bag of our undealt with stuff. Oh, it's too scary. Oh, I'm so powerless, or so helpless, or I'm so inadequate at this, or so bad at this, or whatever. In actual fact, it's just a story. It's not true at all. Not true at all. There's compost in there. Yes.
Dragons are also seen as benevolent protectors.
Oh, benevolent protectors, that's a good one as well. And in a way it's probably good because it's good that we're kept away from dealing with that stuff until we're ready. Until we're ready. Because you can't ask anyone else to give space for your expressions until you're willing to give it first. You're the one that has to say, do you know what? My feelings have value, my opinions have value, I have a desire for how I feel about things to be voiced, to take up space, because they're worth something. And until you're willing to champion what's inside you, you can't ask anybody else to do it first. You just can't. You just can't. It's unfair. Unfair. So, that's an unexpectedly long segue into a bit of mastery there, but it's important for us to get the context right on our judgment of the masculine, and our judgment of masculine energy. Because what we're dealing with here, so in my tradition, the Toltec tradition, gender is an expression of electromagnetism. Again, it's a repeat for some of you, but you probably can never hear it too much, because people are at first like, what do you mean? But what I mean is, so the masculine in all of us is the electrical. That's why male energy tends to be all charged up and then discharged and it's gone. Like, oh, who was that hot aroused man that was here a minute ago? He's sleeping. No, it's because it's after discharge, it's gone. So charge and discharge is the masculine, and that's all the energy for change. So all that stuff we were talking about earlier, frustration, anger, all these energies that go through you, these are all masculine energies because they are the fuel for change, the fire for change. They charge you up so that you have the fuel to do something about it. It's masculine energy. Feminine energy is magnetic. It's magnetic, which is all about attraction and repulsion. So this is why women, that's why you have to deal with guys being what they're like, is because you deal with the energy of magnetism more. So, but we all have both, that's the point. We do all have both, we're all electromagnetic in nature. And what's beautiful about our language is that we all already perfectly use perfect gender language to denote what's happening in gender between us. So, whenever we're talking about capacity, we're talking about your capacity to take the charge that's in you. Do you have the capacity to wield your anger at the state of the world in an honourable way without it burning you up and those around you? Do you have the capacity to face the resistance to the change ideas that you may bring? Because resistance is electromagnetic as well. Resistance is an electrical thing. And whenever you seek to bring change, you will meet resistance. It's the laws of electromagnetism. And if you are prepared for that, then you don't get disheartened by it. If you're not prepared for it, you're like, oh, they resisted it, they didn't want my change, I'm going to go have a beer. Because you weren't expecting it. You've got to expect it. The status quo will resist change. It's just nature. If you don't think it's true, look at your own resistance to your desires to change. You even resist your own desires to change, don't you? You make all these claims to yourself, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to change my diet, I want to change what I'm doing, I want to start doing this, and your own self resists it. You resist yourself, don't you? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Just as my weak spot. And it's like, can I stop eating this many crisps, please? No, I'm going to keep eating them.
I was only thinking today, I have to be told this in a million different ways before I accept it. Please tell me in so many different ways.
Exactly.
Because I need telling so many times.
Yeah, well, this is what it takes to bring change. You've got to give it countless times because there's just such resistance within us. But it's natural, this is the point. It's totally natural. When you understand it's natural, then you can apply the work where it should be applied, which isn't in avoidance, isn't in escapism, isn't in becoming disheartened, isn't in becoming broken-spirited, which is all what happens when you judge it on the face of things, thinking, oh, I'm just not good enough, it wasn't a good enough effort. It's like, no, it's not that. You didn't have the capacity yet. Go and cultivate the capacity by learning how to take charge more, which is masculine, electrical. So that's basically, and when I say take charge, it's not charge over others, it's to be able to handle the charge for change that burns inside of you every time you let it. That's the thing. And everything that we normally do is to suppress that charge. In a moment. Our whole culture is set up to discharge and suppress your charge for change. That's why there's alcohol available everywhere, there's drugs available everywhere, there's pornography and games everywhere, there's all the unhelpful foods readily available by the tills. These are all to help suppress your charge for change, to medicate and avoid it so that you won't deal with the edge required to become skillful with it, because then you can really take charge, which means you'll have capacity, which means you can handle resistance, which means you're a true agent for change at that point. And what people don't realise is that's all gender language, and that's all about gender mastery and bringing change. Yes?
Would the capacity be the capacitor?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
Electrical,
Mm-hmm.
magnetic charge.
Exactly. That's what I mean. We already have the perfect language for it. Even in gender interaction, we talk about being attracted to people. It's because it's the laws of electromagnetism. Even being repulsed by somebody. Also, it's like, whoa, that person's repulsive. It's personal to you, and somebody else might find them attractive. But again, it's the laws of electromagnetism. And when we see it as that, we can put context to it and suddenly update our judgment of our efforts and the efforts of others. That's the key here. So, when we are looking and judging our own efforts to bring change, and certainly the efforts of our men to bring change, because this is the thing, here's an interesting thing, is that because our judgment of the genders is totally on its head in culture. Because we have this idea that, that somehow women are more on show. It's just somehow, you know what I mean by that? The women are more vulnerable, women are more on show, they're more exposed in some way. But actually, we're evenly exposed, we're evenly vulnerable. And there's something interesting where the main difference between male energy and female energy is actually all about balls. Okay, it's all about, we're not talking about balls anymore, but it is all about balls. And the difference between having the balls on the inside of the body cavity, which is where they are with women, and on the outside of the body cavity, which is where they are with men. And this is what gives rise to a peculiar vulnerability and sensitivity in men, and a peculiar strength that women have. So women have a peculiar strength because of having their balls on the inside, and it's also what gives rise to their modes of arousal, their modes of how they view the world, how they tap into feeling in different ways than men do. And it's also about how they judge things as well, because it's an internal mechanism generally. Whereas men, because their balls are on the outside, they'll tend to view things from the outside, they'll view things more visually, and they'll process things on the outside more. Why didn't someone balls there? You need to be second in there somehow, but this is the one with no notes, just picking farts out of my brain. That's the job.
Having the balls to make the change.
Well, yeah, that's nice, Darren. Let's go with that. Yes, the balls to make the change, that's exactly it. So there's definitely an element of the balls to make the change, but they're different in men and women. It's different. How it manifests is different. So how a woman digs deep is different from how a man digs deep.
Some people use that term to describe intestinal fortitude. Balls. Paul's intestinal fortitude.
Intestinal
Fortitude, that's a good word, isn't it? Intestinal fortitude. Guts, balls. Yes, absolutely correct. Because that is what it takes to bring change. You're going to need guts. You're going to need balls. We talked about guts last time. That's what the parasites were about. It was about guts. So this is the Follow On talk. Excellent. There we go. It wasn't even made up. Oof. Thank goodness for that. That was effortless, almost. So, moving on from guts, the last talk was about guts, which you do need, and that was exactly what it was about how you need healthy guts to be able to bring about change, because you need the guts to handle the charge in the first place. But then the follow-on from that is, once you have got healthy guts, then you can start to cultivate your capacity by building up your balls energy, be you a woman or a man. So in a woman, you've got this, I like to call it the womb. It's this womb energy, the womb. I don't think it should be a silent B. When they say it's like a silent B, I don't think it should be silent. I think we should say womb. It's got a great sound to it, yeah. I was sitting there with baby number 4, like womb. You need a woman.
Wouldn't that be something in the electrical department of capacity, flux capacitor?
A flux capacitor, yeah, Back to the Future now, isn't it? Just pour any old rubbish in there and a baby comes out, look at that. No. But it is all gender is electromagnetism, all of it, all of the expressions of it. All men and women have electrical and magnetic in them, it's just flipped the opposite way. So for women, the magnetic is primarily on the outside, the charge is on the inside. This is why, it's really funny because to me, women are really hard. Women are hard as nails. Guys, what do you think? Women hard?
Can be.
Tough, yeah, tough. But a lot of women, when I ask them, they think they're soft. You know, they're soft, and it's like, oh, trust me, you're tough. You know?
One of the kids.
Sorry?
Grab one of the kids. Yeah. She's lovely, and then they go, what the f?
Yeah, exactly. Then you'll see, because on the inside, it's on the inside, whereas men it's more on the outside, but they're softest putty on the inside. You see, we've got this alternate thing, so it's really interesting how the genders view each other in odd ways. Yeah, so, still got no idea why I'm joining with balls, it's just an important segue anyway. But it's about the, so anyway, we might as well move on, because we've got about 20 minutes for the break, don't we? Okay, so all that blurble was about perhaps you healing your judgment of yourself for your past efforts somewhat, and how you have expressed your feelings, how you've expressed your sensuality, or perhaps even your sexuality, be you a man or a woman. Because for all of us, it's going to spasm first. We're going to get it wrong first. But you must give yourself the space to improve. You must be compassionate and realise that it takes space and effort. You've got to let it loose, you've got to let it move before you're going to get any better at it. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter which feeling it is. I do say this point usually when I'm here about, when stuff bubbles up in you, have a go at expressing it, whatever it is, because otherwise you just literally cannot get better at it. You cannot get better at it by thinking about it. You can only get better about it by when it's moving through you, because that's when it's real, that's when it's embodied, that's the truth of it. And that's the time to start to practice using it, because that is your literal embodied truth. That's when you are acting as a whole person, as opposed to talking about how you feel. And talking about stuff doesn't bring change. Loads of people have been talking about change for decades, and the change isn't there, is it? And it's because they're talking about the change. And when you're talking about something, it's like it's always over there. When you're speaking from it, then you have a chance. Other people are attentive to a human being that is skillfully expressing their charge. They're not attentive to somebody who's having a rant or having an unskillful spasm, basically. Not very nice, is it? None of us like an unskillful spasm, do we? Nobody likes it. Yeah. So, but the thing is, you can't move from point A to point B without having some practice in there in the first place. So the other reason I mention it is because perhaps if I have a bit of compassion and empathy for your parents, for their efforts, where they may have got it wrong with you. Because one thing I've noticed is that there seems to be like family baggage. So there's cultural baggage, national baggage, that we all have to carry. So when you go abroad, certain countries aren't really going to like the fact that you're from this country because of what this country's done to them. part of the national baggage. Yeah. You've got your family baggage, which is stuff that's carried on from generations of how people have treated each other.
Ancestral.
Ancestral stuff, yes.
The other being archetypal.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Nice distinction. So, in the ancestral baggage, what I noticed is I would judge my parents very harshly. And in a way, we've got a problem in our culture because most of us were handed over to the state, for education. And what that does is it tends to turn us against our family. I remember when I started to view my mum and dad as being a bit thick, because they weren't in the know. They didn't know anymore. I stopped seeing them as authority. I stopped respecting them because I was getting my juice from my friends and from the school. But I was kind of indoctrinated that way. And it was a bit unfair because it does damage to the connection between parents and children. So, and it also meant that I had no context for judging their efforts at bringing me up. Until I had children of my own, and I was like, whoa, that completes the circle of life, that one, doesn't it? Because I started to see that despite all the stuff that I said I was going to do differently, the first thing that bubbled out of me was always what was done to me first. Because that was the spasm. That was when I was caught off guard. When I was at the edge. I was caught off guard. And I saw what the child in me received. And I passed some of it on to my children. But some of the stuff I was quick enough to catch. And I knocked a few things off. Oh, it's better than that one. It's better than that. Yeah, exactly. Yes! Major fist bump. I didn't do that. So you win some, you lose some. So that helped me view my parents in a different light, because then I thought, I wonder what they fist pumped at, that they did better. Maybe they only knocked one or two things off, and maybe they had to then, maybe they did 5% improvement, maybe 10% improvement. I don't know, maybe they did 30%, and I was just really harsh on them. And they knocked loads off. I don't really know. I don't have the context of their upbringing to judge it. But I certainly know one thing. They would have tried to do as well as they could in the context of their power, their capacity, is that word again, the resistance they were experiencing in their lives, is those words again, and they had to deal with their own spasms. Okay? So, in terms of that family baggage, I think all of us managed to knock some off to the next. And there's improvement, there's evolution, there is improvement. And so maybe just view your parents in that context somewhat. We're going to move on to the men again here. So, if we accept that there was something about the old ancient model of the men that there was a problem with, because there must have been, because women really weren't happy for a long time, then what happened was, during the spiritual purpose of the world wars, was to eradicate the ingrained behaviours of that model. Okay, it was to wipe them out, wipe it out. It was to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It was to get rid of the bathwater at the time, which was these rigid expressions of what it meant to be a man. The stiff, upper-lipped Victorian male. Wiped out. First World War. Loads of them. Boer War before that. Then we had the First World War, wiped out across Europe. And then, if you look at men in the early 20s, they started to be more feminine because they'd been left to be brought up by mum. The examples of dad were gone, literally gone. The dads weren't there, they were dead. So the examples of how a man behaves had disappeared, and were beginning to disappear. It started to become a story. And in fact, I can't remember who it was. It was one of the authors. I can't remember who. A very famous author wrote, "Where have all the broad-shouldered Englishmen gone?" In like the 20s or something like that. It's like, maybe they're dead. That's where they've gone. A few of them survived, the rest are gone. And then we had another wave in the Second World War that wiped out another round of men, and some women in this instance, but mainly men again. And then we had the beginning of, because of mass state support and well-developed state services, we had the ability for women to seek divorce and still be supported because there was state support there. So the very things that they used to need a man for, they could turn to the state for. They could phone the police, They could, they could, invoke state services. They could get benefits, things like that. These were all traditionally things that they would need a man for. So they would tolerate things that they didn't then have to tolerate anymore. So they would say, right, no more of this, blah, blah, blah. And then we ended up with the beginning of the 70s, was when that really sort of kicked off. When we really started to see the rise in single-parent homes, single-parent families, which was also the beginning of the demise of traditional relationships and marriage. So we, sorry? Cosmopolitan came in a bit after that, yeah. Well, Cosmo really influenced me, turned me into a proper femi man. That's right, I was a true femi man for most of my young life, that's for sure. But it was so the real breakdown of the family unit and the beginning of absent father syndrome. And this is something that gets viewed very negatively. But I wish to cast it in a positive light for the very reasons I mentioned earlier. But I see it's positive because good. They weren't good examples. If you ask them, they'll probably admit it. Okay? Because they weren't really supported. They didn't have good examples. They were in a world that was shaming and embarrassing them and expecting loads from them too. So it's good that they were kept away, so that the sea of boys that were left with zero male influence or just sloppy male influence. I mean, I consciously remember when my gender journey began, 10 or 11, I was looking around like, where are the examples of what's a good man? It was like, James Bond was my best, like, that was it. Roger Moore, that was my growing up, and I was like, that's pretty good, that's pretty reasonable. And even now he's viewed as a total misogynist, But that was the best of my time. But I made the quest then, that was when I set out my quest, I was like, do you know what I'm going to find out? Because this is a mess. This is a mess, I'm not happy. I had this wounded relationship about men and in relation with them. So, it was 9 years later I discovered total gender. But, point being, it's good because it left boys where most of them, and this is where a lot of times what I call a femi man is what I called it, but it was where I had, instead of listening to men, because I didn't like them, I started listening to women. And reading women's magazines, all the boys in my school, we were all listening at the girls' tables, listening for what they were saying, what they thought they wanted, and looking at their answers in the quizzes, and the girls. Yeah? Anyone remember that? When we'd have these quizzes in teenage girls' magazines or cosmopolitan magazines, all the lads would be looking at the answers because they thought that was the thing to do. It was like, if we read that and then make ourselves into that, then women are going to want us. Do you know what? I don't know anybody that worked for. Nobody. And there's not a single man I knew who moulded himself into that, who listened. I'll tell you what, ladies, we fucking listened. We moulded ourselves into that, and you turned your fucking noses up at us. Because it wasn't what you wanted. It fucking wasn't. I know of no marriage that has survived that. No marriage. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I was a true femi man in that respect. I made myself into that. And literally, I had to chuck the baby with the bathwater with the basket. I was like, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. I listened to you, that's dirty, that's bad. Yeah, I agree. I was in agreement. It's taken a long time for me to realise, wait a minute, kind of need that. Oh, wait a minute, all we have to do is polish this off a bit, dust off all that crap. Well, it was just the expression that was the problem. The energy is amazing. The energy is beautiful and necessary and pure and true and good. And that is the thing. That is the thing. So, before we go into the break, I'm going to talk about what I call the bubbling pool of the spirit of goodwill that is the spirit of man that has run throughout our ancestral lineages across time. And it's something, it's the gift for the men and for the women. And I got it from the ancestors that started to speak to me, not the living ones. And it's because men are really in a pickle, as I mentioned at the beginning. They're struggling. And it's because they're looking around for, what are men good for? Because all of the public arena is judging men for the deeds of other men, for starters. So it doesn't matter what you did, you are one of those categories, therefore you shall be punished for the crime that you did not commit. I have no idea why that is allowed to stand. I have no idea why that is allowed as a trustworthy or reliable logic for either men, for white people, for anything like that. I know of no court in the world that would allow that to stand, and yet it is considered acceptable. Anyway, this is a gift for all of them, because when men are looking around and saying, well, what are men good for? Because in the public arena, men are just being like judged for their ability to express anger, like their anger mastery and their sexual mastery, and that is the measure of a man. There it is. Men, fail, F. I'm talking about the experiences of the men here, not the women. This is what they're hearing. This is what they're feeling. 84 a week are killing themselves. How many others are addicted, depressed, medicated, escaping, unable to engage, because they don't feel welcome, they don't feel wanted, they have no space to become skillful with the energy that's moving through them. And when you don't give space to energy, it starts to invert. And when it inverts, it either turns on self or turns on others in twisted ways. So the current strategy is not the way to improve things, the current strategy is the way to make things worse. And that's why things are getting worse and not better. That's why people are not being made happier, they're being made more angry and more frustrated. And we're like, why isn't this getting better? And I'm talking about within relationships here. Obviously some things are getting better. Technology, that's getting better. Sex dolls, they're getting better apparently. That's part of the agenda. Anyway, man's aggression there. So, I want to offer something for the men to help them see where the gifts of the men surround you everywhere. There's from this bubbling pool of goodwill. And I only started to discover it when I went beyond the edge myself. And so in the Toltec tradition, you find the masculine at the edge. And this is to understand, so electromagnetism manifests everywhere in the universe, everywhere. So you'll find that we are microcosm of the macrocosm. So it's the same in us as it is in cells, atoms, planets, everywhere. And that is that you'll find the electrical masculine on the outside, generally speaking, of cells, atoms, planets, all the rest of it. And they provide a semi-permeable membrane that decides what gets in and what gets out. And literally, that's how your antibodies work, it's how your cells work, it's how food gets into the cells and how bacteria doesn't. It's an electrical charge at the outside. He goes, no, are you getting in? Oh, no, you're not, you're bad, you're not getting in, don't want you. Oh, yeah, you're welcome, oh, come on in. You know, that's it, that's the gateway function of the masculine, the boundary function of the masculine. Our problem is, we've taken that off the men, remembering the men are the ones that are collared and cuffed. So the collared and cuffed men, the men are collared and cuffed because that task has been taken off them and given to the state, and the state is failing miserably in the job, which is why crap is getting in. Crap is getting into our communities, it's getting into our families, it's infecting our children's brains, it's infecting our brains, and putting us all under stress because of this failed function. But anyway, so what you'll find is this masculine's at the edge. And so the Toltecs would say that, and it's the same with atoms, you know, planets as well. Even the relationship between like Andromeda and the sun is managed by electromagnetism. And so it's not just about pulling things close in oneness and unity, it's about keeping things at a healthy distance as well. And so, that manages a relationship. One of the unity principles is like, yeah, we're all one, let's all live together. And it's like, well, that doesn't really work, because if I hang out here forever, you're going to be like, will you get away, please? You've been there for 4 hours, now go away, And it's like, yeah, Andromeda and the sun, they got on great because they only come close once every 40,000 years. Something like that. They have to be that far apart. This is all managed by electromagnetism. So, the Toltecs would say that the masculine stands at that edge, and men carry this spark to be able to leap into the unknown for short periods, to face the teeth of the night, to face the unknown for short bursts, and to bring back new resource and new material and give it to the feminine. Here's this, dear. Have this. And gradually, things expand because new things come in. And this, by the way, is what happens now, because we're more balanced, we're more gender balanced now, all of us. This is what the masculine and you is doing. So whenever you are going, when your mind is like going out beyond into the unknown for new ideas and bringing back new material, that's like the masculine, bringing it back. And the feminine of your form is like digesting and organising all of that to put it in its rightful place, to update your form. And it's a beautiful interplay, a seamless segue that's constantly happening of, going out and coming back, going out and coming back. That's like penetrate, withdraw, penetrate, withdraw, penetrate, withdraw. It's constant gender. So from my, journeys beyond the edge is when I discovered this connection with the ancestors. Oh, one more thing just to put context on that before I say it. As always, and yet another delay. We have it's just to put the context on how we have a gynocentric view in our culture, how everything is women-centric these days. And it is, this idea of boys shouldn't cry, this idea. So I remember being brought up with this, the idea of the toxic masculine saying, "What do you mean boys shouldn't cry? Oh, you cruel men, saying boys shouldn't cry. Come to mummy and cry. Come with me. Come and cry at home. Of course you should be able to cry." And the thing is, nobody ever said, well, maybe they did in Victorian times or whatever, but the spirit of man is all about, it's not about when he's at home and safe that he shouldn't cry. It's about when he's at the edge, facing the teeth in the night, with the potential screams of his brothers in the night, not knowing what he's facing. That's where the energy of the masculine, about learning how to temper your fear and your terror into something that's useful, so you don't break down, bubbling, giving away your location and unable to act. It's all about context. That's the place where you don't want to cry. That's where the teachings of the masculine are for, not for when you're at home, safe with your buddies and your sisters and your mum and your gran. There it's fine, anything goes. It's for at the edge and beyond. That's where the masculine is for. That's where we hone our temper. That's what temper is about. Temper isn't just about anger. Like temper is about metal. Metal, when you're tempering metal, you're creating a useful edge from something that was brittle or could be brittle. And really we have to temper all of our emotions into a useful edge. It's like if you get so sad by what's going on in the world that you can't act, that you can't take care of yourself, you can't look after your body, you can't get on with your job, you've lost your temper. You've lost the temper of your sadness. It's exactly the same as your anger, you've lost your temper. So the masculine is all about that edge. What do you do there? How do you make something useful there? So from my journeys beyond the edge with men in recent years is where I discovered this gift of the ancestors.
Thank you.
I'm not finished.
Pause.
I did.
You.
I paused to let you digest.
Vital thing to do.
Yeah, it's all right. So if you ask natives, like Native Americans, where are the ancestors? They'll say to you, they're in the rocks and the trees. And if you say that to Westerners, they're like, what? Where? No rocks or trees here. Need a rock. Rock and tree. Where? And if you go into Native American ceremonies, they'll refer to the rocks that they bring into the sweat lodges, like grandfather and grandmother and stuff like that. And Westerners going in there are like, okay, grandfather, don't really know what it means. Whereas what I discovered on these missions is where our ancestors are. So I want to share it with you before we have our break. So when I was beyond the edge, I discovered something. And it was that when we are, and all of us go beyond the edge at different places in our life, and it's where we're really being tested beyond the limits of our pre-existing capacity. We may be afraid, we may be uncertain, we don't know what's going on. And what I found is that there's a quality within us all that says, what can I do so that those who come after me can be safer, do better, last longer, go deeper, stay longer? And that was when I realised this is where the gifts of the men lie. Because what the men have done is they have codified their experiences beyond the edge into tools and processes and systems. So let's look at the saw for a moment. So you can go to spend £9 on a saw, probably £7, probably £3 somewhere on a saw. Let's go for the £9 one because the £3 one is not going to be very good. A £9 saw in B&Q or wherever, and it's going to work. Alright? You're going to be able to saw a straight edge through this table. And people think the saw is a designed object. Right? The saw is not a designed object. Everything from the taper, the shape, the materials, the handle contours, the number of teeth, the angles of the teeth, the spacings of the teeth, how sharp they are, every one of them has been refined by the minds of countless people, usually men, who are beyond the edge, in the piss and wet rain, in the cold, in uncomfortable, unpleasant situations going, why is this stuck? Why is this not fucking cutting? I'm going to have to walk home 3 days to go and get another one and sharpen it or something like that. This is rubbish. What can I do so that those who come after me can do better, stay longer, be safer, be drier, They codified it into these tools. So that now the saw is like 10,000 ancestor power. Okay? Try doing that job without a saw. Doesn't do it. They've done it. They've done their job so well so that anybody barring physical disability can be like almost a master of materials for £9. It's incredible. Look at a drill. For 50 quid you can go and drill 3 mil 4 inches in concrete. Oh, look how great I am at DIY. Bzzzt. That's like 2 billion ancestor power in there. Literally, 2 billion ancestor power in that. Try doing it with your finger. The car. Start to lose count of the numbers. How many ancestor powers in a car? Computer, the phone, the road, waterproof clothes, roof over your head, flushing toilets so you don't have to smell your own shit.
Cuddly toy.
We're looking at the gifts of the masculine here. Maybe that, I don't know if that came from beyond the edge, that one. Maybe it did. But my point is, though, that these are the gifts of the men. These specific things that I've mentioned. Law and order have come from men who realised the consequences were the screams of their dying sons and the wails of their raped wives and children. I didn't realise this until my partner's from the Czech Republic. And I'm standing in Czech one day. I'm going to use the whiteboard just because it's there. Look at this. Yeah. So, just for you, Andy, because you made the effort. This is so stable. Excellent. Good story beyond the edge, that one. What can I do so this is better next time? Excellent spirit of goodwill. So, it's alright, that'll do.
It's an S table.
That looks like nothing like the Czech Republic, but that is to be figuratively the Czech Republic for this evening. So the Czech Republic is a landlocked nation, which means it has countries on every side. When you look at the contours of the United Kingdom, it's the sea on each side. That's why they call us island monkeys, because we really don't know how to treat our neighbours. Okay? We really don't. Whereas people who are landlocked do. Because every angle on that land has been devised as a result of all forms of slaughter and debate, all forms of warfare and discussion, to arrive at all these angles that are now the Czech Republic today. As a result of learning the consequences of not working out the problems, the consequences of not trying to be fair. And if you read modern law books and look at modern laws, they're crap. Modern laws are rubbish. They're poorly thought through, they're unjust, they're imbalanced, and they're rushed through. You read some old law books, they are incredibly well thought out, incredibly considered. Now, it's usually men that have been applying it, but not always, but usually. And if you read them, you'll find that these have been considered. And these are the foundations of our modern laws, where people can now, you don't have to worry about the, you don't have to, teenagers down the road, stuff like that, you can phone the police. Now, admittedly, since we started to destroy the gifts of our ancestors, of law and order, you now can't really rely on them, but there was a time when you could, not that long ago, but we started to destroy the gifts that they gave us in our benevolent state structure that was here. But all of these things, so the reason I'm mentioning this is because we are wrapped in our ancestors right now. We are wrapped in their gifts and their desire for us to go further and do better and be safer and stay longer. And what are we doing with their gifts? Bickering about petty crap. I just can't even, honestly, the incredulity that bubbles up in me, the more I consider this, is staggering. And for those who wish to pour scorn upon the men and so-called oppressors, I say to them, go and sit in a fucking field forever. Never get in your car again, never pick up the phone again, never call the police again, never use a tool again, and tell me the extent of your power and how bad the men were. Their gifts were so beautifully given that they've become invisible. They've become invisible, but they are staggering in their beauty and in their offering and in their sacrifice and in their service for all of us. They're literally like garments. And this is when I suddenly understood why the Native Americans maybe said what they did about the trees and the rocks, because that's what their structures were made out of. That's their garments. Their garments were the trees that they would fell to make into their teepees. You know, they would refer to the ancestors and the animals that they would slay to turn into the shelters that they would make. You know, or the rocks they would use to heat to then keep warm longer than a normal fire would. Maybe that's why they would call them the ancestors. But I invite you to consider now that if you feel lost and looking for where the gifts of the masculine are, you're wrapped in them like a blanket. Every time you've not got the rain on you, every time you don't have to smell your own poo, every time you can magically speak to your friend on the other side of the world as if it's some kind of teleport for audio as you lift it up to your ear. You've got men to thank for that. And they've given it to you. They're not there making demands. Alright, the phone company is, or the guy that offered it isn't. And here's the issue we're facing in the gender crisis that we're in the midst of, is that the claims of women power are women wearing a robo-suit of masculinity and the gifts of the men to wage their war against men. It's a robo-suit. They're wearing all these things that the men have given them. Going, yeah, you fucking man, blah, 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 blah. It's like, whoa, just, alright, they gave you that, so put that down, they gave you that, put that down, they gave you that, put that down. You're left in a field glove.
Yeah, like dungarees.
Yeah. You know, well, I think textiles, we could probably say that it was...
Oh,
Sorry, mate.
no, you're too kind.
Yeah, sorry. No, you can't have that one. No. Well, we're probably clothed in our grandmothers and mothers, and we're surrounded and sheltered by our fathers, but you were on a roll.
But who finds the cotton?
Well, you know, this is the thing, there's definitely balance. The point here is, there's definitely gifts of the feminine within it and gifts of the women. I'm painting the picture of the men because the men are on the run not knowing where to look for what men are good for. And I'm just trying to list them so that you can see them. But also to connect, for you to connect, to look round and realise, because I'll tell you what, one thing I've learned, the more I've gone on this ancestral journey, the more I've found that our ancestors are actually there. They are whispering to us, egging us on to do well. They want you to thrive. They lived in harsher times so that you would do well, so that you could do better, so that you could feel good. So you wouldn't have to worry about certain things they had to worry about. And instead, because of that, it's almost like we've been too coddled. It's like we've been too coddled, and now we're wasting our precious consciousness on fiddly little nonsense stuff. You know? It's like we have personal wounds that we've generalised. You know what I mean? It's like we've got personal wounds because of our inability to keep that tight and specific. Oh yes, this person did this with me. It's become generalised where this person did this to me, so all of that group are to pay. You know? And that's pretty much the state of the central narrative in our culture right now. So there's a young man's hand in, over to you. Yes?
I'm quite tired, so forgive me if this is quite scattered, but could you possibly relate to, because obviously there's like feminism is made of primarily younger people, could you relate that to their anger towards the older generation for ramping up things like the housing market and ways they're perceived? So because the way they perceive it is that the older generation has ramped up like housing prices and student loans and such like that. Do you reckon there was a way to cope with that there now, maybe some of what they grew up with in their masculinity?
Yeah, possibly. And I think some of those people as well, you know, insecurity drives so much. And I think a lot of the hoarding and a lot of that sort of thing you're referring to is a result of insecurities that we're not connected with. Yeah, you know, post-war era, because that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Maybe usually baby boomers, something like that, came out of that era. They were dealing with different challenges. So one thing, I've worked with men and women of different generations, and they definitely face different challenges. There's no doubt about it. And what I tried to share is something more general this evening, that hopefully everybody can get something out of. But you know, I agree with the issue of that problem. It is an issue of stagnation and fixation again, but manifesting in a different way, which is the claiming of structures and the fear of letting the structures out, you know, fear of loss. Not like most people don't realise that money is a unit of change. Money is a masculine energy, so that's why you know, if you look at the language of money, you spend money and you talk about getting change. your bank charge you and they discharge you. You know, this is all, and currency is about current. This is all about electrical. So money is a unit of change. And what we're dealing with here is actually a spasmic, unhealthy use of the masculine again, where the charge energy for change is being hoarded by just a few people. So the resources for change are out there, and they're just not flowing. You know, and again, this is deformed masculinity at play. But that is now, we're now in the stage where both men and women are dealing that deformity evenly, because we are much more gender balanced than in the past. Yes, no, we're going to break.
In fact, 97% of the occupational deaths, 97% are male.
Yeah.
And 91% of serious illness in occupations is also male.
Yeah.
That's a recorded fact.
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's mentioned. So I got the figures wrong. I mean, I thought it was 93%, but yeah.
Well, they're about.
Yeah. But this again is because men go to the jobs at the edge.
Yeah, that's right.
That's it. They're at the jobs at the edge. Yeah, the dangerous jobs at the edge. That's the thing, because when we look at where the push for equality is, it's for all the safe and primo jobs, and not for the ones at the edge. You know, not for the ones in the mines, in the sewers, in the places that actually maintain the fabric.
Then the equality of this sort of equality thing comes into it. Whereas almost all the men are losing their lives and their limbs and this, that and the other. And the establishment is pushing forward this 50-50 situation.
Except in that area. Yeah, exactly. There's a woman called Karen Strawn. I've got a great respect for her. She's speaking at the international conference this weekend as well. And she talks a lot about the disposable male. And this is where the idea of men, women and children first comes from, is that men have always been viewed as disposable. And she said, what we say about these men being privileged, they've been the ones that we've been happy to bend. We've expected them to die. We've sent them to die. We've wanted them to do it before us, because that's kind of where they've put themselves. Rather than making a big deal out of it, let's just, not necessarily celebrate it, but at least notice it, at least acknowledge it, and acknowledge it as being, again, one of the gifts that they have offered, which is that men have a tendency to defer to women, and they do. You know, when we look at just the few psychopaths that have been used as the examples of masculinity, they are not the majority of men. The majority of men defer to women, want to do things to please women, and will generally work to that effect. You know, that is, again, is almost an observable fact in a lot of relationships, in a lot of situations. We're going to wrap up for a break, and then afterwards, we can maybe have conversation and discussion, because the talk for the evening is done. Your brains have probably had enough of that. But if anything, really, please be mindful of where you have been given immense gifts of comfort from the chain going all the way back to ad infinitum. At every time we use these tools that have been given to us, and if we ever forget it, just imagine what it's like without it. So thank you for your time and attention. We'll see you after the break. Everybody's brain had a nice break there. He talked about him going off on a few segues. I think I did that to you lot, so apologies if that stretched your brains a little bit. Like I said, it didn't come with a preconceived idea of what we're going to talk about, other than ancestors and masculinity. That was it. So I think I covered both of them, or a bit of masculinity anyway. So as I said, I wasn't really going to do a second part of my talk. I think there was enough in the first part. I would like to open it up to see what that has stirred up in any of you. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts you wish to share, if there's anything you want to ask me to go further on or to repeat, I'm happy to help. Yes?
The question I would ask is, how much of this would you consider to be social engineering by the establishment, the elite, to set us into this situation?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the gender balancing of us becoming more balanced as masculine and feminine, as men and women, I think that's natural. I think that is evolutionary. I think it's proper. And I can maybe elaborate on that if anybody wants me to. But I think the way in which it's been twisted into a gender war and into selective data to polarise reactions is totally engineered. Totally engineered. There's no other way it could have taken over central academic spaces and thoughts otherwise. I think one of the other problems we've got is to do with where the thought leaders have come from in recent years, and I think that's affected it. Freud's father of psychology, but a lot of modern psychologists dismiss a lot of what Freud had done because they said, well, Freud was working with people who weren't well, and he was presuming and projecting his conclusions from these people who weren't well onto everybody. And that was why...
A tiny little minority of society.
Sorry?
It was a tiny little minority of society.
A tiny minority, and projecting onto everybody. And we have to look at what's happened in the gender situation for the last 40 or 50 years, and it's been exactly the same. But what we've had, the thought leaders have been the pioneers in being vocal about gender, which is really, if we're looking at it, we're looking at the LGBT community, have been the general leaders of the subject of gender and the judgment of historical gender. And these have been the fringe of the community, but it has been a fringe position. And that has influenced loads of the thought positioning. So that, like at the minute, in this country, one of the other speakers at the international conference this weekend is Dr. Eric Anderson, who's from the University of Winchester. He's an American man. He's written loads of books on masculinity and the masculinities. He's the most quoted masculinity scholar in the UK. He is the author of the new book, new Routledge book on masculinity, which is going to be the academic framework for influencing masculinity studies in the future. And he's a gay man, married to a husband with some adopted children. Now, I respect Eric for the work that he's done, no problem about it, but when we take this position and project it onto the general mass, it can't be held to be true. And when we have people who are adopting that as if it were true, just like what we had with Freud, was we end up with distortions that don't fit. And they don't fit. And I think this is what's happened. This has kind of influenced some of the gender stuff. And so we've got this combination of selective data combined with social engineering that would love to continue divide and rule, which is, let's just keep turning the peons on each other. Let's keep turning them on each other. And this, to me, the stage that we're at is we're actually at the stage of what I consider to be the war for fertility itself. So the family unit has already been divided. It's already been divided. It's already been destroyed. If we look at the empire builders, the greatest threat to the empire builders across time have been tribal societies. And the difference between tribal societies and non-tribal is that the family unit is supreme. Nothing breaks the family in tribal units. They don't send their children away unless they select the people they're sending them to. They're hand-picked, and it's tightly controlled. We are the opposite of that now. We send our children to just whoever the state has chosen. And but the thing is, all of the empire builders couldn't defeat these tribal communities. They couldn't infiltrate them, couldn't spy on them, all this sort of stuff. So that's why one of the reasons why the family has been destroyed. If you want to have a state that governs everybody, you need to break into all the units that are tight. So now the family has been broken into. The next thing is the bond between men and women. And when the bond between men and women is broken up, where it's then left with distrust, judgment, even anger and hate, then you've just got literally individuals that are easy pickings. And then what we end up with is, because of this influence of the distaste of the interaction between man and woman, which is what we're seeing rising now, with basically what are, now it's no offence, and I genuinely mean no offence, this is just an actual observation, in the Toltec tradition is, as far as I'm aware, the only tradition that explains how homosexuality arises energetically. It has a place for it. There's no other tradition that I'm aware of that has that. So I would literally mean no offence when I'm speaking this, but there is only one fertile position. In all of the other gender permutations that are LGBTQIA, blah, 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 there's only one fertile position, and that is still male and female. That's literally it, no matter what. It's still the fertile position. And what we're seeing now in the social engineering component is to hack into that, basically. Because at the minute, we've got people handing their children over to the state at sort of like, 3 and 4. That's when they're going into full-time nursery care, which is now the beginning of indoctrination and subjugation to authority. What we see then after that is when people no longer want to have children, when they view them as a burden, when they view them as distasteful, as unpleasant, as unwanted, then when nobody wants to have children, then what we have is, because it's like, oh no, I didn't want to have children, just to say that, by the way. I didn't. I was adamant. Why would I want to bring a child into this horrible, cruel world? It's a terrible place. I was adamant in that position. Life went, woohoo, we've got a different opinion on that. And what I realised, though, was I realised that I had drawn the straw of sacrifice, to give away part of my personal desire to do with what I wanted with my time to invest in the future. So the game can continue. And I realised that had happened to somebody else. I call my mum and dad. And I really had to process my negative reaction to unwanted pregnancies about that. And I had to process it. I had to deal with the issues of life and death. I find it funny how they call it pro-life and pro-choice. Why is it not pro-life and pro-death? Because that's what it is. It's pro-life and it's pro-death, that's it. Okay, so then I dealt with that. That was the thing, me and my partner dealt with it. We faced it. We've been in the abortion clinics. We've looked at the pictures. I've got 4. I've considered ending the life of humans that are now glorious humans who are going to go forward and do things that I can't even imagine. So when we have people who are choosing, and they're being socially engineered to choose to opt out of their lineage, of the sacrifice of their ancestors, by being fed facts, it's like funny, like people will say, I don't want to have children because of overpopulation, and it's like, you've been shown pictures of busy cities and starving Africans, but not about all the empty fields. It's like, and also what it does is, this is what the state engineering has done is, it's made out as if all lineages are the same. It's as if all lineages are the same. So you can opt out because everybody's the same, it doesn't matter. Whereas actually, your line has immense sacrifice and skill in it that cannot be repeated. And if you are going to be the end of your line of the branch of tree of life, that's fine, because children aren't for everyone, I really get that. But if you are going to be the end of the branch of your branch of the tree of life, be a beautiful fruit or flower, please, not a barren bitter twig, because that's what is happening to some. But I think this is what it's about. The social engineering is to take charge of fertility, so that people. I watched a little video that circulated on Facebook just now about ACEs, asexuals. And these people say, I'm just not interested, just not into any of that. And what we're going to end up with is people like this saying, what are we going to do about the species? We must be objective. Okay, we shall take the sperm, introduce it to the egg, we shall have these children, and then somebody will take care of them. And people will be handing babies over to the state, and then we're really going to have proper Babylon, proper job, proper people like, children, 1 second, buddy. The thing that we have is that we're mammals who are deeply sensual. Deeply sensual. You look at other mammal groups, the lions and the apes and the primates, they're all lolling about all over each other. They're like, they're really deeply sensually rich. We are becoming increasingly sensually starved. And what that means is we start to feel isolated and abandoned. And it also means that when we experience sensual contact, we get overstimulated and overexcited and we spasm in ways that aren't really that pleasant. We misread our own senses. That's with people, that's with us now. You imagine a child who gets denied the necessary mammalian contact from his birth or just after. That's really where the social engineering is going, as far as I can see. It's really towards transhumanism. So I think a lot of it. Sorry, that was a real segue off your question there. I hope I answered it.
What do you think about this gender neutral clothing and everything else in the baby shops?
Yeah, I don't know what I think about it. I think it's confusing.
But it's handed the second one to the boy.
Yeah, but the thing is though as well though, it's like if you look at native tribes though, I wear a skirt. Do you know what I mean? The garments aren't gendered. They're not, they're really not. All across Africa and the Middle East, guys are wearing frocks. Do you know what I mean? It's just about the design of it. Fair enough, it might be a bit different if mine was, ankle length with big bouffant bum news and all the rest of it, frilly bits. That might be a bit different, it might make a bit different statement. But garments themselves are not gendered. Now there's face paint. You know, it's like people are, what's been interesting is things that aren't gendered are being made statements of gender. It's like, it's not a statement of gender to put paint on your face. It just isn't. Yes?
I live this all the time because my kid is male to female trans. And my friend the other day said, do you know what a TERF is? I said, no, it's a
Trans-excluding radical feminist.
Radical feminist. Okay, right.
Yeah.
But for me, if I think about that, I think we can't get rid of, we can't have children. So that is the kind of stance against my child's state.
Say that last bit again?
That's part of the stance against my child's state.
No, the bit before that.
That she can't have children and she can't.
Yes,
be
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's part of the point. Exactly, because and when children are being indoctrinated into that at a young age by the state, they're making life. Now, let's remember, these are children who they're not allowed to decide their own bedtime. They can't vote. They can't drive a car. They can't go for a job. But they're allowed to make lifelong decisions about their gender. And if the parent wants to influence that, the state can get involved and take them away. In Australia, they can literally take your kids away. In Canada, they'll literally take your kids away so that they can foster this. You know, it's like in this country now, there's over 1,000 children on puberty blockers. It's like, who invented puberty blockers, please? Can't we take you outside and have a swift talking to that might involve, you know, a bit of spasming, but, you know, I really mean it though, because it's like, puberty blockers are a real crime against humanity, because it's basically saying, oh well, if you decide later on that biology is wrong, then the surgery is much more easier and effective. So puberty is being delayed. And again, puberty doesn't end until your early 20s. You know, puberty, the hormone levels of puberty, which, to be honest, there's almost none of the opinions I had during puberty that I have now. Almost none of them. You know? But the problem is that these are being allowed to be taken as absolute statements, and you're right, what ends up happening is you end up with people who later on, they might change their mind, but it's too late because they're now infertile. This is the guy now, is Walt, his name is, you might have seen his videos circulating. He was an M to F trans, he was one of the early transsexuals, he went through the surgery, he went to the doctor said, oh, we know what's wrong with you, gender dysphoria, this will fix it, come along, we'll do this. He lived as a woman, full surgery, all the rest of it, until he realised, wait a minute, it took him his whole life, his life journey is a testimony, I think, for everybody to see. Look, it's because he listened to so-called experts, he listened to people that had money in their pocket out of it, and an agenda out of it, and look at what's happened. You know, this is exploitation of our young. Remembering again this masculine function of keeping the boundary.
So he regretted.
He regretted. He changed back. He's now woke again. He's a man now again. Yeah, but he can't do anything about his bits. Yeah, they're gone. Yeah. Yes, Tony.
You mentioned you were talking with Karen Straw next week.
Oh, I'm excited about that. Yeah, this week.
So,
I don't know if we get to talk to her. I hope she wants to talk to me.
If you're in the red pill thinking, and you're a man going your own way, how then does that, your masculinity, going to manifest?
It can't. MGTOW, have people heard of MGTOW? MGTOW is men going their own way, which is basically saying it's too risky to get involved with a woman. It's just too risky, there's nothing in it for you. So do you know what, we're going to wait for the sex dolls, we've got porn, see you later on. Literally. They are not having anything to do with women, it's too risky. So they're saying, look, I'm a successful man, I've got good money, she's just going to take it off me. You know, that's literally how they view it.
Take it off, yeah.
Yeah, that's how they view it. So to me though, that's like become, it's like the male equivalent of radical feminism. You know, I think you mentioned TERFs, the trans-excluding radical feminists. Have you heard of Get the Hell Out? So Get the Hell Out took over Brighton Pride this year, which was a bunch of lesbians who wanted to get the L out of LGBT because they were talking about how the LGBT community were allowing heterosexuality to infect lesbianism because of male to female transsexuals who identified as lesbians, which meant that they were men who identified as women but were attracted to women. I know that's a bit of a headbender, I know it is, but that's like real. This is like real.
Are you saying there's a turf war going on at the park?
There is a turf war going on in this department. So they're trying to get it renamed to be the LGBT community.
What's a turf?
A trans-excluding radical feminists, which are feminists who don't want to accept the transsexual male to females are actual women. Yeah.
And their conferences are being boycotted as well.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of hands here, yes.
In our talk and our understanding, is there any place for a creator, or are people going to continue to rely on their own understanding, thinking that they are wise in their own eyes?
This is the personal choice that everybody maintained it can have at any point. Yeah. So everybody still has that choice.
That situation is called free will, which God
Yeah.
gave to us.
Yeah, indeed.
So that we
And that's
can
what's coming
create
out.
our own Sodom and Gomorrah in modern day 21st century. It's happened before, it's coming.
Yeah, that's plenty of people. Well, so this young man's coming here. Yes, your hands up at the back there. Tired man from earlier. Yeah.
What would you say to the state of free speech in this country? For example, I don't know if you know this case, but there was a YouTuber a while back who got fined. He made a joke that he put up a YouTube video on. He was a Scotsman, and he said he was to his girlfriend to the least cute thing possible, which was a Nazi. So he made a punch. It was kind of in bad taste, but it was still a joke.
Was this the dog?
Yeah. And in the end, he went through a bunch of trials and got fined £800.
He went to jail, didn't he?
No.
He didn't go to jail.
He was paid for the jail sentence, but
Right.
but yeah, because it blew up, it blew up in their faces, because everyone was like,
Yeah.
"Well, this doesn't happen." He got fined £800. What should say to that journey? Because I know that like, how was it like?
You're not free.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's only one place free speech still exists. One place. The same place it's always existed. Speaker's Corner. Speaker's Corner is where free speech still exists. And if you want to feel the edge of the front line, go down to Speaker's Corner on a Sunday. Go down and have a wander around there. It's bristling with charge polarity, of the mix of gender debate. There's, and there's religious debate. There's all sorts going on down there. There's genuine free speech there. But to me, it's the only place that still exists, or in private conversation. But even in private conversation, people overhearing will seek to police in silence. It's really interesting. Seek to police silence, correct. The rise of bigotry is huge in those that, they accuse of bigotry, but they themselves are the bigots. There's a huge rise in bigotry in this country, which is literally intolerance of people with a different opinion. Literally that, and bigotry is rife at the minute, and getting worse. Yeah.
Well, in parts of America in the sort of 40s and 50s, you've got a large number of Christian churches, maybe 20 or 30 with state different denominations, and the bigotry was just absolutely ferocious with all of these churches hating and detesting each other. And it was a turf war because they were trying to maintain their congregation against the opposition.
Yeah.
Bigotry in religion is huge.
Yeah, but this is now, what we're dealing with now is bigotry not in religion. We're dealing with bigotry in just general conversation. Political correctness, yes. Political correctness, identity politics have all become bigotry, real bigotry. It's genuine. Sorry, this lady had her hand up before, then we'll come to you. Yes?
Yes, it was to do with the creator over there.
Oh, yeah.
As you said.
Hey! Hiya, glad you could make it.
I am the creator.
You were saying laws were brought in to protect us and whatever, women and children. But actually, going back to the Ten Commandments, and there isn't really anything on there that we disagree, because I don't want your wife to sleep around, you want your neighbour to kill you or covet your goods. So there were actually good, sensible things. Where it went wrong was the infighting and making it about religion, but not faith. So I'm just saying, those, and what I really was going to make a point is going back to our ancestors, is like their fundamental human rights values, and you think how old they are. If you could all live by that, so I think we mustn't forget that those are out there, and just because churches have made them the wrong thing and used them for their own purposes.
Yes. That's a really good point. It's really about throwing the baby out with the bathwater again, I think, on that one. That's why I would call it, that's why I think it's happened. I think there's because, she's talking about the difference between faith and, what religion has become. And that's a big theme of mine. I haven't spoken about it for ages here, but it is a big part of my work as well. It's about, not only to polish up the armour of the masculine, it's also trying to polish what I call the pillar of theology. So, in some of the esoteric teachings that I follow, there's 3 pillars of mind. So the 3 pillars of mind are science, philosophy, and theology. And everybody's got them, everybody's got all 3, and they all support each other or they encroach on each other's grounds. And so science is the way that we test our methods, it's our method system. Philosophy is our questioning system, it's how we test our questions, it's how we test our moral frameworks and address certain questions of, why, how, things like that. But the theology pillar is where religion has attempted to codify theology in the same way as the masculine attempted to codify masculinity and didn't do a good job. And what we've done with theology is we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater in a lot of cases. And really, to me, theology is about that we still don't know how anything or why anything. And this is really what religion rose up to seek to answer, was to try to give an answer as to the how, just how anything. So science claims that it tries to answer how. So I've always done this with groups in here. When I talk about the spasm in arms, I didn't do the exercise today, but if I get everyone, you just lift your arm up for me. Okay, you lift your arm up and you put it down. Okay. Can anyone tell me how you did that? How did you do it?
Okay.
Yes.
DNA.
Practice.
Practice. Yes. Practice. That's it. Now science will try to say, you did that by brain signal going from your brain to your hand. And I'm like, did you do that then? And no, you didn't. But really, that's not how it happened, that is what happened. That is what happened. It's just a greater analysis of what. And all science has done across all time has got better at refining what is happening. But it's not how. Theology, that is the remit of theology, which is, actually, do you know what? This is amazing. There's this sparky stuff moving about the place, and I've just got no idea how. And what you'll find
I've
is...
heard that there's a God that does it.
Some people codify it that way, that's correct. But the thing is, the pillar of theology is where wonder lies. It's where wonder, awe, reverence, respect, humbleness comes from not knowing how or why. Why are you here? How are you here? What are you here for? This is firmly within the remit of the theology pillar. And when we bin it, we leave it to science and philosophy to answer. And what they've done is they've done a pretty bad job. Because they've said, you just need to work, that's the thing, you just need to do this and do that. And when they've tried to list the what you should do, it doesn't make people happy. So I just wanted to say that to give credit to what, because I know there's probably quite a few secular people in the room, and I think you can be, there's secular individuals that I know who haven't lost the pillar of theology because they've retained the wonder. They retain the mystery, they retain the unknowing, and you find that the greatest scientists are the ones, whether they're secular or not, their pillar of theology is intact, whether they know it or not, because they retain that wonder and mystery and unknowing, and they indeed bring great gifts to all of us. Yes, at the back. I'll come back to you in a second.
Do you think fear is the main aspect of religion is replacing law, and do you think that there's an attempt to actually engineer that?
I think it was part of the social engineering. Part of the social engineering was to take everything that has been good for humanity has been taken and used against them. There's just no doubt about it to me. Just everywhere you look, whenever there's been something great, and this is the real crime against humanity, this is the real, I suppose, toxic masculine, which is where certain people who were given the gatekeeping function as to what can access the central mass, people have said, there's something great for the central mass, and some individuals with power and influence have said, no, that's not going out there. Like we were talking in the break there, somebody was talking about what was it? The never-ending tyre or something like that. So Dunlop had like the everlasting tyre, so you never have to change the tyre in your car again. So Dunlop bought the patent for it, and I'm sure you've all heard stories of other things like it, where some big company with power and influence that had the ability to distribute something into the mass of people has bought something that could have benefited everybody and the environment. They're like, do you know what? We're not going to let that in. That's the real toxic. That's the real toxic,
The
right
light
there.
bulb. Edison did it with the light bulb.
Yeah, light bulb, there we go. Right, just this young man, did you have a question at the back there? Or are you going? Alright, good night, James. James for coming in.
So, just a few quick fire questions to see if it's going anywhere. Where's this conference that you're going to next weekend?
It's in London.
Where was the one before that?
Australia, I think.
The one before that?
America.
So, mostly Western countries?
Yeah, at the moment, yeah.
So, what proportion of attendees were white?
I've never been.
Oh, you've never been?
I don't know, never been.
I mean, what
There's 20 countries are sending delegates as far as I'm aware. So the chances are, because it's been spoken in English, I would imagine that they are generally Western people. What colour the people are though, I don't know.
Well, what I was trying to ascertain is whether there is, in terms of masculine guilt and identitarian politics and all that, how much of this is white man's guilt being arguably projected on?
Well, I think that...
So I don't see these problems in Asia or Africa or South America so much as in the West.
Well, we're seeing it, but because this has come out of Western academia. It's Western academia that's produced these thought forms and produced this new language. You know, people don't have this language. We've all heard the language of this from people that have gone through Western universities and Western education institutions. That's where it's come from. So yeah,
Is that where the problem is then?
I would say so. I would say that is not the place to send your children these days. It used to be the place to send your children if you want them to have an open mind and to learn new stuff. It seems like it's the last place you're going to send your kids these days. That's for sure, yeah. Dangerous places. Yes.
There's a difference, whilst I agree with you fairly fundamentally, between religious theology and religious philosophy. And what I mean by that is religions that have a code of practice that you have to adhere, otherwise terrible things will happen to you, versus religious philosophies that have done it by their own introspective self-discovery. Do you understand the difference I mean? I mean, the divide and rule game is true. Philosophy is actually the headstone of science. Natural philosophy was the sciences before it became chemistry, biology, physics and maths. So it's just a granulation of tributaries of study. But the whole thing is, how does everything work is the philosophical thing, is the science thing. So we can say how it works, but we can't say what's behind it that actually brings it into being. And you're back to sort of deism. The argument, the point I'm making with theology and philosophy is, lots of people do not discover the divine through theology, but lots of people discover the divine through religious philosophies in terms of the methodology to actually get to that.
Yeah, this is where this idea of the three pillars, I think, is really sound, because it basically says they trigger and support each other.
Yeah.
You know, so by following a method, which would be the science, you will then, so maybe a philosophy will trigger curiosity to then apply the method, which would be the science, which would then awaken the theological wonder or the experience, or vice versa, whatever. But the point being that they all interrelate and interplay, and if one of them tumbles or is discarded, its space is taken up by the others, and that's when problems ensue. And what we've seen in the past is where the religion component of the theology pillar encroached upon science and philosophy, which is what we consider the era of where the church went horribly wrong, was because it was the theology pillar trying to encroach on the others, and we've now gone too far the other way. The pendulum swing always seems to go too far, that's the problem, before it connects. Yes?
Bring it to the individual. What would be your advice to men out there that don't have a good male role model, father figure? It's not out there.
What would be my advice to them? To find good examples, that's the thing. There are more good... When I was young, I was really struggling to find good men. But I have found in the last 10 years, I'm finding more and more good men out there, like really good men with lots to offer, good thought, they've got dexterity, they've got some skill, alright, they've got work to do, but they've certainly knocked a lot off of what their fathers have dumped or not dumped on them. The key is accessing them. That's the thing. This is the problem at the minute, is that this is where I think, so when I use the term brother now with some of the men I encounter, I really mean it, because I think women are 100 years ahead of men in this respect, where the networking, the relationships between the networks are much stronger. I have real problems networking with other male content providers. I'll go up to them, I'll go and turn up at their stuff, and I'll go and try and speak to them afterwards and talk about trying to do something collaborative, and they'll never call. You know, because they see me as a threat. They see me as competition, which is old school male as far as I can see. It's inbuilt in the men. But I think until men get over that and are willing to come together to create spaces for the men, which is happening, there is more and more of it happening, but we've really got to do things like start to remove the paywalls, start to remove the really high paywalls that exist at the minute, where yes, you can go and do X, Y, Z, write a passage, but it costs you X £100. You know, that's not accessible to the boys that are in need now. There are some mentoring groups in the Band of Brothers in the southeast. They managed to get some government funding, which is great, and they do mentoring with young men, but they're only working with young men on the criminal end of the spectrum. You know, there's literally no funding available to work with young men. It's not seen as a need that needs to be met. As I mentioned, men are not allowed platforms on university campuses. When boys are trying to form men's groups or men's spaces, they're being invaded by feminists, or calling them hate groups, and telling them that if they want to discuss masculinity, they need to come and do it in the feminist groups. And in fact, the very influential Southern Law Poverty Centre in America, a hugely influential organisation, had listed over 60 men's groups and men's rights groups as hate groups. They're now being taken to court for that, because the guys finally put some funding together to actually legally say there's no foundation for that other than your personal opinion that this is what happens when men come together to talk about the issues that men face. So we've really got, there's actually some social work that needs to get done before there's really anything generally accessible. We're going to get kicked out. Before there's anything generally accessible, yeah, get your orders in now, I need to get this. Before there's anything generally accessible. But I try and make myself available wherever possible. I'm trying to put on more spaces and more things for men and young men. But it's finding the other men that are willing to put the time in and the travel in, and there's money issues involved as well, and all of these things just make it a hurdle to get over. So I really empathise with the young men that need role models now. Thankfully, there's people like Jordan Peterson's now an international name because he gives really accessible stuff that's freely available, which is really useful. But he's managed to get funded from elsewhere. The problem is that for the stuff that's locally available, it's all paywall based. That's the problem, Fishing around it, but I will say there are good men out there. People have to start just showing up at places where there's men's stuff going on, and they'll find there are networks. Well, there's no network drawing that I know of, but there are good men to meet, and it's worth spending time with them. And have a look and see if there's any mentoring organisations around, because they are growing, and there may be a mentor available, which is basically an older man who's willing to give of his time and his experience to a young man who maybe needs just a bit of a stable influence around. Yes, I'll do the same thing.
Matt McCartney at Embercombe did a lot of good work. But again, it was probably you have to pay.
Yeah, you got to pay, that's the thing. I mean, it's already got a level of pay, but if lots of men come together and pool their resources, they can start to say, well, these guys are paid because they can, that means we can open it up to people who can't. And this is one of the big problems.
Says this to me, she says, Tom, men's work, you need to go and speak with other men.
Yeah.
You need to do
You do, absolutely.
And I agree, but I don't know where to go.
Yeah.
I know men, but they don't talk.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I just give a shout out for the Buddhist Centre in Birmingham? They actually engineer sole men's groups to be able to discuss their inner workings and actually sort themselves out. If you want a men's group, they're dealing with it.
There you go. Buddhists have men's groups. And there are men's groups around, it's worth looking, but some of them are closed, some of them are open, they're all individual. Yes.
And with regard to boundaries, is Brexit a healthy masculinity meeting an unhealthy feminine?
That's a segue question, but my simple answer is yes, I think it's a healthy thing. Yeah, very healthy.
You have to be careful answering that, it might get shot.
Yeah. I remember when I went to London to speak on that exact subject, and I was like, look, I'm here as a mixed race guy, son of a migrant, in my kilt to tell you it's great and I voted for it. I'm not apologising. So yeah, I think it is. It's about a healthy boundary. I think it's very good. Yeah, very useful. And I think one of the problems that we had is people blurring the boundary of how they feel about Europeans with their attitude about Europe, and I think it was a blurring of the boundary of the helplessness they feel about the politicians that they know, and they somehow feel that there are politicians that they don't know and that are unknown faces that they can trust. And that, I think, is the problem, is that this faceless, unknown bureaucracy that they can't speak the language of is somehow more trustworthy than the, shameless and shameful at the same time bureaucracy that they can see and can understand. I think there's loads of boundary issues going on with that.
Does that side, but is it going to be healthy for the really poor people in this country?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't know.
What's your view on Greeno? Brexit in name only.
Do you know what? I haven't been following it because I just don't think it's going to, and I'm not sure if it's going to turn up because it really isn't. I don't see it as being the desired agenda of the elites, basically, to have us Brexited. Now, if it was, the only reason I would see it as being is so that we could be like the elite party place just off the coast of Europe, where they could come and do stuff where it was deregulated in some way. But it doesn't look like it's even going to happen. It's just being held off until the second referendum is going to look like it's going to come in some way, and people are going to all of a sudden say no. I think one of the things is that transition is always challenging. Transition is always a bit of a challenge, and I think that if we had a stronger leadership, if there was more visionary leadership, then I think people would feel safer with the Brexit, because I think it makes a lot of sense. The implications of a ruling body that you have to use your passport to cross a body of water to then go and try and engage with, and you can't speak their language, and you need a translator for, the implications of that are enormous. They're enormous. It's easily dismissed, but it is an enormous issue. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think we've got a trustworthy government ourselves, but at least you can drive down there and you can speak to them, and you can get involved in local politics that can actually influence. And yet again, it's like I said in the beginning, people don't want the jobs. I said, well, if you want to influence it, you can go for the job, you really can. But that's the thing is, do you want to? I weighed it up, having worked in politics, and being a whistleblower, worked in the Scottish Parliament at senior level, worked with all the members. I considered it, and I was like, do you know what? I actually don't want the job. You know what I mean? That's what it boiled down to. It was for me. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be easy, but it's a difficult one. Everyone's got their own opinion on it.
Thinking back to Europe, is France the only language that splits its words into male and female? Because they actually do that.
No, there's others. There's others. Yeah. Yes.
Just to get back to our debate, what was the point? Yes, women need re-educating as well, because we were taught for at least 2 generations to fear those men when they take our jobs and they're holding us down. And not my beliefs.
I really feel the pain of that.
So I think, and some Americans use your groups to be women haters, but what you are really doing is for women need to understand men are willing to put themselves out there like you, are doing it to empower their families, to empower their children, as you say, to empower the next generation. And I think this message is not out there. You are considered the weirdos and the activists and the anti-feminism, which is not there. So I think we need a better image so women can actually check it out. I mean, that's all.
He's a 6'3" man in a kilt. You're a goddess.
Yeah, but I don't have no public image though. You're right though, I don't have a public image or a public brand. But it's something I've struggled with, but for other reasons that we don't need to go into just now. But I agree with you, because and I have to say that when I've been putting on gender events for the last 10 years, usually it's the majority women that turn up, because they're interested. Trying to get men to turn up for men's work is a fucking nightmare. Even if you make it free, they don't bloody turn up. Honestly, they're like, I'm a guy, I'm alright. What are you about? Have you got a pint? Do you know what I did? I was running a men's space at a festival, and we just couldn't get the guys to turn up, so we changed the name of one of the events to Free Beer and Porn. The number of people that turned up. You know what I mean? Honestly, it's a joke. But it's really hard to get guys to turn up. They're afraid of having their own lack of skill outed. They're afraid of being seen to be a boy. They're afraid of being seen to be frauds. They're afraid of all these things. They're afraid of competitiveness. They're afraid of inadequacy. I've had those fears myself. But the point is, we can't move forward until men are willing to actually show up.
That's conditioning, though, isn't it?
It is conditioning. They've been divided and isolated
They
to feel
can't
that
show
way.
any chinks in the armour.
Exactly. But the other problem is that the image that gets shown of the men's groups, is a bunch of guys sitting around crying and moaning about how hard done by they are. And that's a horrible image as well. And to me, and that does happen, to me there's a need for that, but to me that's the processing of the past. That's called therapy, men's therapy. That's fine, there's a place for that, but that's not men's work. That's the men's therapy. That's men's healing processes. There's a place for that, but that tends to be what ends up a lot of men's groups end up being. Whereas the empowerment, the upliftment, the celebration of each other, which is what you see in sisters groups with women, uplifting each other, celebrating each other, acknowledging each other, helping each other, investing in each other, committing to each other, that is lacking hugely. And that's what I meant earlier about the guy is just a nightmare. So women, I think, have been doing well. They're willing to show up for it. They're open to hearing it some of the time. A lot of the time, the ones that have been so loaded that, they've been so loaded with disinformation and they basically had their emotional sensitivity exploited with something I call false magnification. So I'll just explain that because it's really important to understand false magnification. This is what Me Too was. So Me Too was a bit of what's called false magnification, which is when you see something on the telly, something traumatic, your sensory system experiences it as if it's happening now to you. So that's why you get scared watching a horror movie. You get emotional watching something else. Oh, it was so sad. It's like, well, it didn't happen. It's not happening now. That happened 3 years ago on a set in California. But you get it evoked as if it's now. So when you take the experiences of thousands of women across 5 decades, across 40 countries, and you display it over a 2-week period, the sensory network feels it as if it's all now. As if it's now. Oh, the outrage, the horror, the aghastness, the rage at the injustice. It's huge. And it feels real. But it's something I learned recently, there's a great phrase, and that is, your feelings are real, but they're probably not reality. Your feelings are real, they are real, but they're probably not reality. And this false magnification is being used on all of us. It's what the media is doing to all of us, men and women alike, to turn us against each other, to turn men against men, and to turn men against their own masculinity, to make young boys turn away and shirk from their masculinity because they're afraid of it, they think it's horrible, and then they're scared to even engage with women because they've got no masculinity to do so. And then you've got the women who then are so bubbled up with all this information. This is why you look at women who go into gender studies and women's studies, and they go in as young, curious women, and they come out as these militant, raged creatures, because they've had selective facts fed to them that their sensory network experiences as if it's now. And that's why this new wave of feminists are so toxic. They're so not open to listening. They're so bitter. And these are people that haven't had any of the things they've learned happen to them. They're taking offence on behalf of the deeds of the past. And it's like, that's not healing. That's poisoned you. You've literally been poisoned, and you've not had it tempered with the other side of the coin. So, thanks for your point. I really agree with you, and I really feel the pain of, women who don't realise this is being done to them. And it's being done to turn them against their men, turn them against their sons, turn them against their own relationships and families in a way that leaves them lonely and disconnected and vulnerable to being exploited by consumerism. I'd love to reach more of them. Advert for branding help. Advert for branding help.
By the way,
yeah.